Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Is everybody able to hear me and see you in the chat there? Awesome. Well, I am so excited to have our guest today. First of all, introductions. If you haven't been to one of our webinars before, my name is Caroline, and I am the Director of Marketing here at WellSaid. And I have a real treat for us today. We get to talk to the lovely Gabby here, who is an actual, well said, voice avatar, voice actor. And one of the reasons this is such a unique opportunity for us is because if you are familiar with the voices that we have in the studio, those are all also created from actual voice actors, but their identities are kept anonymous to protect their personal lives and not have their work life touching the rest of their lives. But Gabby here happens to be a custom voice avatar, so you won't find her voice in the studio. Her avatar was created specifically for one customer who owns the rights to that voice avatar, which means that Gabby is able to talk to us all about the experience, what it was like to create a voice avatar, how it's impacted her life, the whole process. And we're really excited to hear this perspective from you, Gabby. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Wonderful. Well, let's go ahead and first, I just want to learn a little bit about you. Like, tell us where you're from. How did you get into? Let's see, you started with voice, or I'm sorry, stage acting originally. Is that right?
Yeah, so I'm living in Los Angeles now. I'm originally from Connecticut, so if there's any New Englanders, hello. Yeah, I started as a stage actor. As a kid, my mom put me in theater, and that's pretty much how I was bit by the bug. And I have a theater degree, and I've been pursuing that ever since. And then when the pandemic happened, that's when I kind of took the opportunity to learn a little bit more about voiceover because it is really such an individual experience. And I was able to, start training, get a demo reel done, and I can work from home. So I started, pursuing that route. And now I do also pursue voiceover as well as TV and film. And I also do action acting. So I train stunts. So that's like another thing that I'm doing in Los Angeles as well.
Wow. So you've got
Yeah.
a whole set of skills on your portfolio there that you can offer.
Yeah, I think, just being as versatile as possible as a performer and actor is, the best thing you could do for yourself. So it's been a really great journey so far.
Interesting. So you live in LA now, pursuing acting career as well as doing voice acting. How did how did you what were your first voice acting roles like before you created your avatar? Like, is it a lot of commercials or yeah, what is that like?
So I think one of the most unique things about this whole experience is that working with Well Said was my first voiceover job.
Okay.
This was the first thing that I really sunk my teeth into. Obviously, I had some training. I had a demo reel. I was practicing copy all the time. So it was a real treat to have this be my first job.
Ah, interesting. So you started looking into the voiceover work. Did you have to do any training for that before you came to us?
Yeah, so I was training with a coach, and we were learning how to break down copy, how to technically handle your microphone, what equipment to get, creating a demo reel because you want to have like your package ready before you start pitching yourself to people. So I really spent a lot of time prepping before I came to WellSet.
Interesting. How does that work with, maybe for one job you need to convey like a warm, trusting kind of tone, and then for another one, maybe you're doing a slightly more dramatic or a different type of voice work. How do you prepare for those different kinds? And yeah, what's that process like of getting into that character, as it were?
Yeah, I think my acting training definitely lends itself a lot to voiceover. I think sometimes there's a misconception that as a voice actor, you just have to read the script and then you're done. But really, like each client, each job, there's a specific, like you said, emotion or mood or something you're trying to convey. So you have to get really clear on that with the client on what they're looking for. And then you have to break it down. And honestly, I do a lot of if someone was watching me in my room, it looks like I'm talking to someone because, you want to picture someone that you're talking to and really just emote to them. So I'm always like, oh, my best friend is right here. And I'm trying to, tell them about the product or whatever I'm speaking about. And, if I have to be warm or if I have to be direct, it's really nice to pretend that you're speaking to someone else because it definitely helps. Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I
Mhm.
could see how that helps you get in the mindset of if I'm going to sound like a trusted, warm authority on something, that's a different use of your imagination than, yeah, some of the more dramatic or other applications.
Yeah, I think you just connect to times in your life where you've had to be direct and warm, and you think back to that and be like, okay, well, what did that feel like in my body, and how did that experience feel, and where was I in that time, and you really try to like put yourself into that moment, and just remember and go from there.
Yeah, I think voice acting work is especially unique. I would imagine when you're on the stage, you are reacting to other people,
Hmm.
and you're not necessarily doing that when you're recording at home.
Yeah, you have to fill in those blanks. So you have to really be yourself and the other person and kind of, look at the script and say, all right, where would someone react? How would they react? And then how would you react off of them? So you're really doing preparation of both people that you're talking to.
Interesting. Um, what is your home setup like? Like you talked about having to get that equipment. Do you like go in your closet to record, or do you have a really nice studio setup, or what's
Yeah.
your
So I record in my closet. It's like great soundproofing, so many clothes. It's really dampening the sound around you. And then I drape a blanket in front of the door. So I'm just kind of like in a little makeshift booth. And then I have a condenser microphone. I have an Audio Technica 2035. And that's what I use with I have a pop filter and I have an interface and it plugs into my computer. And then I record that way.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you too, like personally, in terms of how your voice is going to be used, did you go into this with any sort of things that you knew you didn't want to do, or particular things you really do want to do? Or how did you think about your voice being associated with a brand or a message or something that might have a perspective to it? Was that something you worried about?
I think I was able to work with WellSaid and really understand what my voice was being used for. And I think that's something that I really like about the company is that they do protect your voice. And we were able to put into the contract that I only wanted it to be for this job and it's protected. And I think definitely as a voice actor, that's something you have to think about is where's my voice going to be used because it can follow you from job to job. But I never felt hesitant with WellSaid because it was so upfront and direct. And I always felt very safe and comfortable.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That is, something that we take very seriously. You worked closely with Sarah
Yeah.
Weisweaver on our voice team, and she is now our head of ethics and works very hard with our content moderation because it's really important to us too. We know, like, you don't want your voice out there saying just anything that, somebody wants to type into a computer.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful to hear. So like going forward in your other, like outside of the voice avatar work, are there things that you especially want to do as a voice actor or things that you wouldn't want to do? Or do you?
Yeah, I think I like a lot of like upbeat kind of commercial, like positive stuff because I feel like that just matches my personality, my sound a little bit. Um, yeah, and I want to keep it pretty like PG. That's kind of where I live. So, I have like teaching experience too. So really, like I said, your jobs do kind of like follow you around. So that's something I'm
Absolutely.
conscious of. Yeah.
And it builds on your portfolio too if you develop an expertise in a certain type of content. Someone asked in the chat what kind of customer your avatar was for, and I can't say the name of the company, but I did share it's an educational app
Yeah.
because you have developed sort of that informative, warm, approachable kind of voice that worked perfectly for that.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think too, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but
no, go ahead.
I have teaching experience, like I said. So this job really aligned with what I was doing at the time. So I was really able to incorporate how I am with my students. And I learned how to be direct, but like warm and inviting, because when you're teaching and learning, you want it to be like an approachable material, you know?
Absolutely. All right. Well, that gives us a pretty good idea of sort of where you were when you started this process. But let's talk a little bit more about actually creating the avatar. So you came across WellSaid, or how did you get in touch with us first?
Yeah, so I'm on a casting site for voiceover, and I'm on a few of them actually. And the listing was posted for a job, and you basically apply, and there's a little copy, a little bit of the script there, and you record it, and then you send it in. And basically, I submitted on that site, and then Sarah got back to me and was like, "Hey, we really love your voice. Here's a little like feedback from the client adjustment. Can you do it a little bit differently, more towards these notes?" And then I resubmitted, and the rest is history. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Sarah saying when she introduced you and I that she had a kind of a hard time finding the perfect voice for this customer and that she had auditioned and listened to, I think it was dozens of voice actors, and you were the one, the
I
perfect
know, it's
sound.
kind of crazy too, you know? It's always when you get a job, it's always very rewarding because you know how many um, people you're going up against. Oh, Sarah said over 200.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you, Sarah. I was wondering, I couldn't remember what that number was. Yeah, so it's interesting to me too that there's that much nuance to voice where there were probably a dozen people that were kind of similar to you, but not quite the right qualities that were needed by the customer for that. And so it's such a human thing, you know? Okay, so you had this recording studio at home. Tell us about making the recordings that Sarah requested to create your avatar with. What was that process like?
Yeah, so Sarah sent me, I think it was about 8 or 10 scripts, and basically I just every day went into my closet for a couple of hours, and just recorded and made sure that I was hitting every single note. So Sarah had a lot of feedback for me, like the way that you finish the end of a question is going to sound different than finishing the end of a sentence, right? So after every couple of sentences, I would go back and I would re-listen. And if I didn't like something, I would re-record it. So it really does take a lot of time and patience to get this done. But it was great, and I learned a lot. Like I said, this was my first job, so I'm really grateful for the opportunity to work with someone in a company that was so supportive and nice and gave really good feedback. So I was like learning on the job too. So that was great.
Yeah, I would imagine it's hard to like maintain the same tone, whether it's high, I mean, the energy level in your recordings when you're doing several hours.
Yeah.
Was
And
that
matching
challenging?
takes as well. So if I was in one script and I went through it and I found a chunk in the middle, I was like, well, I don't like how that sounds. I need to re-record it. And like really listening to like match where you are, because we're human, right? So when you do something again, it's not going to be identical. Even if you are saying it exactly the same, you're going to hear differences. So really trying to match the sound consistently through the script, because you're not doing it in one long take.
Mm. So how did you do it over several days, or how did you do the recording, like in hour sessions here and there, or yeah, how did that part go?
Yeah, I think I had a week to 10 days to do all of the scripts. So I was really trying to do one script a day. I would spend about 2 to 3 hours in the booth recording, and then I would spend a couple of hours editing I used Adobe Audition. So I would go through and get rid of every time you open your mouth, there's a noise. That's the sound that it makes. And you have to remove all of that, right? Because when the system is making the voice, it picks up every single noise.
Yeah, one thing I find so fascinating is even editing that out, our avatars still have like a slight breath quality here and there that makes them sound really natural because that's how we talk, as humans. There are those little natural sort of airy sounds at
Mhm.
certain points in different words, and
Yeah.
yeah, that sounds, like there was a lot of editing, so you were doing how much editing to recording? 2 and 2 or something like that? 2
I
hours
would
of each?
I would say, like, for every 2 hours of recording, there was probably, like, an hour of editing, and most of it, what like I said, was just going through and, like, getting rid of those noises or cutting out sometimes I would just leave the microphone rolling. So and I was learning how my system best works, so in the beginning, it was taking me a lot longer, and then I was figuring out, "Okay, how can we be more efficient as we go on?" So, yeah, in the end, probably every 2 hours of recording, there was, like, an hour of editing. Yeah.
Okay, and you were able to complete that in, like, a week or so.
Yeah,
Um,
10 days.
how many full hours did you give our team? Do you remember?
I don't know if let's see, if it was, like, 7 days, 3, 4 hours for that. I don't know, probably, like, 25.
Wow, yeah, that's
I'm trying to
great.
do the math quick, yeah.
So for those who didn't catch previous webinars, we did one with Sarah and with Ryan about creating how our voices are created. I'll link to those in our replay email, but it's pretty fascinating. What we do is we take these hours and hours of recordings that our voice actors provide for us, and then we use those, if clean them up, make sure the audio quality is strong enough. Sometimes people have to re-record if there's weird sort of sound debris in the recordings, and then our machine learning model trains off of all those hours of recording in order to be able to reproduce whatever someone needs the avatar to say that they would type in. So that's a super simplified version, but I'll link to those webinars if you're curious about the specifics of that. It's pretty fascinating. I'm in awe of our voice team. Okay, so did you think about, I guess Sarah gave you the cues of what kind of style to use in the voice our avatars in the studio have, like a very high energy promotional voice, and there's a more conversational one, and then we have a narration style. Did you think, I'm sure you had to think about that as you were recording to make it consistent too.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the jargon of what I was saying was very educational. It was a lot of history. So if you get stuck in that lull of like, I'm just reading off facts, like it can just sound very monotone. So I had to constantly be like, all right, warm and inviting teaching moment. You really step into a role. It is just like acting. Like you really do have to just become who you're trying to be.
You were Gabby the teacher
I
for that
was, and
those
I was in
recordings.
my in my booth just going like this. I do really wish there was like background footage of people doing voiceover in their closet because there's probably, you do some crazy things.
You get, yeah, there's someone I follow on Instagram who's supposedly a voiceover artist, but she's like making jokes and she's always like gesturing as she's talking into her microphone. It's
Yep.
kind of interesting what people do to get the right emotion there.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, so we've submitted the recordings. Sarah's given it the thumbs up. Kind of what happens then? Are you part of the training process? Did you get to hear the status as it moved along, or how did that part go?
Yeah, so I submitted to Sarah. We used Google Drive. I uploaded it. It was really simple. And then as the avatar was learning or the system was learning my voice, Sarah would send me like little clips of like, this is you. And when I heard it for the first time, I was like, I never said that line, but it sounds just like me. So I thought it was so cool to hear my voice pretty much saying things that I didn't say, but sounded like me. Yeah, I don't know. There's probably a more eloquent way to say it other than it was really cool.
It must be a little shocking, or like, I don't know. I
Yeah,
think
it
you'd
was a
be a
little
little
like,
unnerving at
how
first.
does
Like,
this, yeah, how does this happen?
so you felt like it sounds a lot like, I mean, obviously it
Yeah,
should, but it sounded to you like you?
yes, it sounded very much like me.
I think it's interesting because you are a custom avatar. You're not likely to hear your voice out in the world. Some of our other voice actors I know will occasionally hear themselves on a video ad or something like that, which would be
Mhm.
even stranger, I think. But hearing those samples has got to be a really unique experience, I would think.
Yeah, it was
Mm.
cool.
Okay, let's see. I see a couple of questions in our chat. Do you have any other equipment that you really recommend? They said, especially for equalizing conversions, etc., recording wise. You said what microphone? Yeah, you have like a really good setup there.
Yeah, I have an Audio Technica 2035, and it's a condenser microphone, so I don't use a USB microphone. So it has to go through an interface. So I have a Scarlett Solo third generation, and it's a little red interface. It's great for traveling. And then I have, my studio headphones, which is also Audio Technica. And really, I don't have a fancy setup. I do have some friends who have sound booths that they like have built or bought and they put in their room. But if you can just get into a space that has dampened sound, like my demo reel I made in my closet via like Source Connect with my coach and an audio engineer. So that's my setup. It's pretty simple.
Ah, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've heard your voice. Did you have to re-record anything after that, or was it once you got the initial set finished, we're pretty much good to go then?
So I would submit one script at a time, and Sarah would listen to them and then give me feedback. And there was only one time I had to re-record a script just because I spoke too fast. So basically,
Mm,
we wanted to make sure we were hitting a time because if we speak too fast, then we're not going to hear everything. So I needed to make sure I was hitting time.
yeah, absolutely. And if anyone else has questions, do put them in the chat, and we'll get to those here in just a little bit. I know this is a unique story we're hearing right now. Okay, so once the voice was finished, how do you feel about the process overall? Was it anything surprising to you? Did it take longer, or was it easier or more difficult? How do you think about it now?
Yeah. So as it was my first big job, I went into it being like, oh, this is not that much dialogue. Like it won't take as long as I thought. So I think I underestimated how long it would take. Um, but I don't think that was necessarily a bad thing. I just didn't know how long it would take. But yeah, no. What was the question? Can you repeat your question? I got like stuck in thought for a second.
Yeah, no. Just if anything about it kind of surprised you in retrospect, if it was more difficult or you said it took longer kind of than you thought. But again, it's like the first time of ever
Yeah,
doing it. And you
right.
probably didn't know anyone else who had created a voice avatar.
Oh no, I've never met anybody else. So this was definitely all fresh for me. I will say one thing that was a little bit challenging at first, which Sarah was great about, was that my settings on my microphone had to be very, very specific for the I think for the voice quality and for the system to make the AI voice. So my gain had to be really, really high, which picks up everything else around. Like I was hearing through my microphone, I was hearing birds chirping. So I think that was like the hardest part was to technically get right. But Sarah like walked me through everything, being like, oh no, try changing this, try changing that. And we finally got somewhere. So that was really great. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, even in your closet, you could hear all that.
Oh yeah, it was crazy. My microphone was picking up everything. It's always when you go to record that someone decides that they want to mow their lawn or blow the
Yes.
leaves. So I would have to like work around that. Take my lunch breaks when I was hearing noise.
Yeah, every time I want to have a webinar, we have like somebody come to the house and my dogs go crazy. So yeah, I know
Yep.
that feeling. Okay, I see a question here which relates to one of the things I wanted to ask you. Do you have any recommendations for prepping for this kind of work? Something like a routine, a drink, anything like that that you do to prepare for voice work?
Yeah, it's really funny. I've learned different tricks to make sure that you're not making as much mouth noises when you're recording, because it's crazy. You don't know how much sound you make until you're listening back to your voice for hours, and you're like, oh my god, tongue it makes so much noise. So I always have water in the booth. I loved honey, Ricola, cough drops, honey, and surprisingly green apples. For some reason, it just like I don't know the science behind it, but if you bite into a green apple, something happens in your mouth where you don't make as many sounds. So that is preparation. And I haven't tried this, but I heard Lay's potato chips Don't know, maybe it's the grease. Yeah,
Yeah, you get all that salt, it like pulls your saliva.
I don't know. It just sounds a little gross to be talking about that, but it really is something that's like, again, you don't think about it, but it's important to think about. And then I think about script preparation is I make sure to read the scripts a whole bunch of times before I go
Mm,
into it. The first time I read a script, whether it's for film acting or this voiceover, is you're just reading it to get the story, right? You're not thinking about character or anything. You just want to get through it, know what it's about. Then you start to get a feel for, okay, this is what we're talking about. This is how it needs to sound. And then you kind of go through it again, highlight any words that you don't know or don't understand, because like I said, this was historical and there was a lot of like town names in the South. And there was different words that I had to go on YouTube and I had to listen. How is this pronounced? And I would have to listen back. So it's really going through the script and finding anything that I don't know how to say or any clarification on how to say. And then going through it again and highlighting important words that you want to hit. So
mm,
that you really want to break down the script. Yeah. And then
yeah.
you record. So there's a lot of work before you even get to the recording.
And is that what you did for the voice avatar recordings as well, or is that more like traditional voiceover work that you would do that kind of a prep?
No, I did that for this as well,
Mm.
especially with a lot of pronunciation of words. And I would have a YouTube tab open as well, like while I was
So
recording
you
if I
could,
got stuck on a word. Yeah.
yeah, see how it's supposed to be pronounced. I do that too.
Yeah.
Uh, so for you, was it the fact that the app is an educational app that your voice was being used for? Would you consider ever, doing voiceover, especially like a voice avatar for other purposes? Or do you think that this is kind of like a good way to use your voice acting while you pursue your other like not real life, but you know what I mean, live
Yeah.
action type of.
Yeah. No, I think I really like the educational stuff, but I'm so open to trying other things. That's how you learn what you like and what you don't like too. I feel like is trying it. So I'm not often going to say no. I feel like I've gotten to where I've gotten by saying yes to different opportunities. So I would never, obviously if it was something that I really was like, this doesn't sit right with me, I would do it, but not just educational, I wouldn't say.
Yeah, cool. How would you say that having a voice avatar of yourself ha after the fact, how has that impacted your career? Has it provided a little supplemental income while you pursue other things? Has it changed your view of maybe wanting to pursue more voice acting than live action type things? Or, yeah, what are the effects on your career afterwards?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the experience and I really enjoy the flexibility it provides you because you do get to work from home and you could do it at any time of day. I did a lot of my recording late at night because it's quiet and you really do have a lot of flexibility and the supplemental income. It came at the perfect time. It was right before I was moving to LA. And I really do feel like it opens a lot of doors for me.
Absolutely. What would you recommend to someone just entering the voice acting field? Like, would you recommend creating voice avatars as a way to expand their portfolio, maybe?
Yeah, I absolutely. I think it was a great experience and I think it really any experience is good experience. That's my thing. And I think it would be a great way to get your foot in the door as a voice actor. And I think, when you decide you want to be a voice actor or you want to maybe pursue this, just start listening really carefully when you're watching television and you hear commercials. Because really we're listening to voice actors all the time, no matter what. So anytime you hear Siri talk on your phone, like, or you're on the subway and you hear next stop is, that's a voice actor, a lot of this. So it's really around us all the time and we have it in us. So you just have to start to listen to it a little bit more and find a coach that you really like and start just learning the intricacies of voiceover. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Since I've been with WellSaid, like you, I just notice it everywhere. It's like, of
Mhm.
course, I knew voiceover was a thing, but when you really start to pay attention to every ad, every, podcast ads and YouTube ads and all these different kinds of things, up all the way up to like the Allstate guy and, these voices that we all recognize from being associated with major brands. It really is eye-opening how present it is for sure.
Yeah, and when you really listen to it, I can say, okay, a medicine commercial is going to sound different than a fast food commercial. Like we already know these things. It's just starting to expand on the skill set with a coach. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as our technology improves, I know you provided several hours of recording. We are getting more and more efficient at that, which is exciting. So, in the future, we think we can train an avatar with just an hour or two of recording, which is kind of a game changer as you look at the possibilities of what we could put together with that. I saw a question about the technology behind the development of the avatars. We did do those webinars about that, which I'll link to you. So I'll make a note to get back to that. What is Gabby's avatar's name? I don't know. It might just be the company's name. So I guess what would you? Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you had to choose an avatar name, what would you choose?
Oh my gosh, I don't know.
I'll let you think for a second. So,
Okay.
just a little background, the avatars that are in our studio, we do work with the voice actors, and not only do they pick the name or help pick the name, they also weigh in on the different profile photos of, what they feel conveys their personality and all of that to be as accurate as possible too,
That's
which is
awesome.
really fun. Yeah.
Okay, so I have two.
Okay.
We were talking before about how Meryl Streep is my like idol. So I think I
Yes.
would name my avatar Meryl or Benson because I'm a huge Law and Order SVU fan, and Olivia Benson is such
Oh,
a
yes.
powerful lady. So I think those would be my two choices.
I love it. Yeah, everyone, since I'm in Indianapolis, I was pumping Gabby for celebrity encounter stories since she's in LA. And so she was talking about Meryl Streep. Benson, that's a really good one. You could be Meryl Benson.
There we go. There we go. We just made it one.
Got legs. Okay, here's a question. In your recording session, were you ever asked to read anything humorous or anything with empathy? Like, how do you handle sort of those different? Is it more just that role playing you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, it's more just about the role playing, and there wasn't anything really humorous because this was kind of more, we're explaining facts about history, but there was some small like taglines where at the end you'd be like, next session or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was. So I did get to have a little bit of my personality in the avatar, and I think that's the most important thing is with voice acting is don't try to be someone completely. You want to like bring a little bit of yourself to it because your voice is your voice, and bringing yourself to a job really is just going to elevate the sound that you bring.
Yeah, I would think too, it's such a subtle thing, but we can tell all of us when someone's faking something, and a voice is such an authentic experience. It's like, I don't know that very many people, maybe Meryl Streep, could like convincingly be a different voice for hours and hours and hours and hours of recordings. Yeah.
Especially when we're listening to voiceovers or recordings, you have no image to match with it, so you're creating this all in your head, so every sound is going to like decide what the person looks like to you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like when you read a book and you imagine what you think the characters look like,
Yeah.
and then someone makes a movie of it and they cast it all wrong and you're
You're like, this isn't how it's supposed to be.
I could hear them in my head. Okay, let me see if there are other questions in the chat area. I did see some feedback that they wanted to see our faces more, so I stopped the screen share, but it is time for some Q&A, and we'll send a recording of this to everybody probably early next week if you have to jump off early or whatever.
I see a question that I can
Oh,
answer.
go for it.
It was, if you make a small mistake, do you start over or simply redo and continue on? I think that's a great question, and I think it depends on the situation. So if I stumbled over a word in the middle of a sentence, like an and or a but, that's really hard to, pause, go back that to that like beginning of that word and start again. So a lot of the times I would just jump back to the beginning of the sentence for a lot of
Hmm.
it. And the editing software is also really great because you can like pin in a while you're recording, you can be like drop a marker where you need to go back and edit. So a lot of the time I wouldn't go back to the whole beginning of the recording, but I would probably go back to the beginning of a section. So that's another thing I would do when I was prepping my scripts is I would break it up. So I'd have like a long
Mm.
script and be like, okay, I'm going to try to get this chunk done. And I would go through that until I got that chunk done. And then I wouldn't have to touch it again. So I wouldn't have to go back to the very beginning. I would probably go back to the beginning of the sentence or the beginning of the paragraph.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful to know. It's actually very similar to how we render text in our studio with the avatars. Is it's like you don't want to do a giant block because if the pronunciation needs a tweak somewhere, then you have to re-render the entire thing. But if you can do little chunks, get them right, move on, then you don't have to yeah, keep going with that.
Mhm.
Any other questions today for Gabby about being a voice actor, creating a voice avatar, um, celebrity encounters? Oh, I had this question too, actually. Good one, Ed. Do you record at the same time every day? Because your voice fluctuates a little, right? From morning to late at night, or
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I was also living in I was living at, my family's house, so I really had to work around their schedules. So I would be like, okay, my dad is going away to a work meeting. The house is going to be quiet. So like that's the most important thing. But so I would vary it, but I try not to record too late at night because I would find my voice is fried, and I wouldn't record too early in the morning because, you just have that morning sound.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But also vocal warm ups are really important before you start recording too, because you want to warm up your voice. It's kind of like being a singer. That's your instrument. You need to warm it up and take care of it.
Yeah. So how do you do that? Do you have like vocal, like just speaking exercises, or do you actually sing? Or
Yeah,
I
I'll
don't
do some
know.
tongue twisters just to make sure my diction, like I'm chewing the words a little bit. Because especially for this, we want to make sure that the software can hear every single sound. So you really want to not over enunciate, but you want to make sure every sound is being heard. And then I sang, in college. So I would do a little bit of my vocal warm ups, just some slides, just making sure you're hitting like all parts of your voice so you are nice and warm.
Interesting. Yeah, I
I
feel
would
like I should do
steam.
that before my webinars.
Yeah, sometimes I would steam. Basically, they have little tools that you can plug in and put water in it, but I would just like boil a pot of water and put my head over it in a towel, and you just like steam your vocal folds so they're nice and ready to go.
Flexible.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I forget what I was going to say about. I wonder, I'd have to ask Sarah and Ryan on our voice team about this, but I would think if you're combining 10 hours of recordings, if your pitch is slightly different in one, it might kind of average out over the training of the machine learning. I don't know. I'd have to ask them about that specifically. Sarah, if you're still in the webinar, you can chime in the chat there. But yeah, that's a good point about like the morning voice is a little different than the evening voice. Mm, let's see.
He says yes.
In your recordings, okay, we already did that one. Oh, Sarah says yes. So I think I was right that the little tiny fluctuations would kind of get smoothed out over the several hours of recording, hopefully. Okay, Marina's asking, what was your favorite part of working with WellSaid? Thanks, Marina.
I think just the support that I got from the team. I really like working with people who are um, just genuine and kind. And I felt that from the moment that I met with Sarah. Actually, from the moment she was like, "Can you please just send us a different recording with these notes?" I was like, "Oh my God, feedback. It's amazing." You don't often get that, right? You hear nothing or you hear that you get a job. So from the beginning, Sarah was awesome to work with. Lots of really good feedback. I felt very supported. Any questions that I had were answered almost immediately. Like you said about the concern of your voice being used otherwhere, like we were able to, put in my contract educational purposes only. So it was absolutely great.
I agree that Sarah is the very best. All right. John asked, does the mood you're in ever affect your work? Like if you had a really bad day, would you maybe skip recording that day and wait till you're in a better mind space?
I think for me, doing this kind of work puts me in a better mood. So sometimes if I'm not in a great mood, I'm like, I get to act today. This is great. So I do think, you know, it does put me in a better mood. However, there are going to be days where you're in a bad mood and you're not going to want to do anything. So really giving yourself that space to, you're also a person. So if you're not feeling it, it could come across in your work. So give yourself that time to breathe and watch some TV. And that's the best thing. You're working from home, right? And you get to make your own schedule. So
Yeah, you don't want that angry voice coming through on the
yeah.
recording, possibly. I would imagine that could affect things. What was it about it that relaxed you, or is it just that it was work and that it was kind of reassuring to have that to work on, or was it actually fun to do, or what was it about it that would put you in a better mood, do you think?
I think it's just what I love to do. And like having a job to do is always really nice as a performer or a voice actor, any kind of, any acting that I get to do, it always puts me in a good mood because I get to do what I love. And yeah, and also it was just fun to be in a booth. I was like, I feel so I'm playing the part.
You are the part, yeah.
Yeah.
A professional voice there. Oh, Sarah says you were fantastic to work with.
Oh, thank you,
That's
Sarah. You're great.
Ed asked, have you ever had a word or phrase that you just could not say? I have my sister make fun of me relentlessly because I have trouble with museum. I say like museum. Sometimes do you have any of those that you have to?
Not for this job, but I didn't know this until I moved in with my roommates. I say the word, I don't even want to say it, both. I put an L, like both. I guess you're
Oh,
not supposed to do that. And I'm also from the East Coast, so I say water weird. And like those are water,
oh,
water,
water.
water.
Water. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's funny.
Regional
Both?
dialects, I guess. But, mhm.
Yeah. Well, one interesting thing we've started doing here in the last year is creating avatars of like regional accents. I don't
Oh,
know. We'll have to have you do a New England one and you can park the
yeah,
car or whatever.
do.
I don't know where in New England you're from, but
Yes, Boston, Boston.
both. That's interesting.
Yeah,
I know
that's
what you're talking about.
fun. Sometimes when I'm doing a self-tape or a recording, I'll listen back and be like, "Ooh, why do I say water so weird? Like it pops
Water.
out."
Yeah. And we do need a Canadian. We need more Avatar, like, regional accents, so Sarah will see if you're, professional enough. Okay, any other questions before we close out our session today? I'll give just a minute here. Where should we reach you? I did put your portfolio link in one of the slides, and I can share that in the, replay email as well in the blog post that we're going to post with our YouTube recording. Anything we should keep an eye out for you?
Yeah, so you can find me on my website, which is gabriellefernandes.com. And then my Instagram is probably where I'm the most active. It's Gabrielle L. Fernandes, and it's Fernandes with an S at the end.
Yes. I had to double check that as I was making promotional materials. Make
It
sure I
happens
got
all the time, but it's Portuguese. Um, yeah, so that's where I am. I post what I'm working on Instagram a lot. You'll see a lot of sword fighting and action stuff if you head over
Ooh, fun. I
there.
definitely follow you over there. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Especially thank you, Gabby. This has
Oh,
been
thank you.
so fun to hear your perspective about creating one of our avatars and what that has been like. And yeah, have a great rest of your day. Everybody, keep an eye out for the replay. And we'll also put this on our socials. So I'll be sure and share that with you if you want to put that on your Insta too.
Thank you,
Great.
everyone. It was great.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.